All right, let's get right to it now with my first guest, Gerald Celente, the king of predictions. He's predicted so many things, from the boom in bottled water to the bust of the stock market. There's a lot to talk about. Mr. Celente, thanks for being back on the show.
Thanks for having me back, Andrew.
Here's what I was reading just the other day. Tom Woods, Liberty Classroom, put out something from Salon, who said, well, all you guys who want to get rid of all the government nonsense, want the government out of your life, just want to be left alone. Where has that worked? What government has that worked in? What place has that worked in? And I ask you, Gerald Celente, do you really think that any country in the world would let themselves just be eliminated?
You mean in terms of not having government control? There's a place for government, but it's not listening to what you're talking about. It's not in your bedroom. It's not watching every step you make, and not having goons arrest you anytime you cross the line, as the people in charge not only cross the line, but they commit high crimes and misdemeanors. For example, like starting wars for fake reasons and no one being called out on it. I mean, so, are there governments that are less intrusive than others? Yeah, there used to be one called the United States, and there used to be a thing called freedom, and there used to be something when you didn't have a National Defense Authorization Act. There was something when the government couldn't go into your homes without search warrants, as they did, as we saw with the example of the Boston Marathon bombing, and how they went into house to house and forcing people out with their hands up. So this is a new America, and we're spelling it wrong. We have to put a K in there. It's America. So, I mean, I believe in government regulation. I believe in things like the Glass-Steagall Act that prevented the banks from, taking over the nation and turning us into slavelandia. I believed in the Robinson-Patman Act, the Sherman Antitrust Act, and the Clayton Antitrust Act that prohibited the robber barons from taking everything from us. And now the new robber barons, they have different names. They're called Home Depot, and they're called Lowe's, and they put the hardware stores out of business that entrepreneurs used to have. There used to be pharmacists, but now there's just CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, etc. There used to be freedom of communications, where they weren't allowed to gobble up all the airwaves and newspapers, and now only a handful own them all. So I'm in favor of regulations. What I'm against, and this is where the difference is, that what I just talked about with the disassembling of all those acts that were put in place so the robber barons couldn't steal everything, and now we have too big to fail laws, is that it's called fascism, the merger of state and corporate powers. So when you have fascism, that keeps down the average person. And they want to put all these laws in place to keep us in line. So that's the difference that I see.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the banks, because last time we spoke, it was on the heels of Cyprus. They had just come in, and they were going to give everyone a haircut. And then they figured, okay, now we'll just take all of your money over this level. Now what we have with Bitcoin, with cryptocurrencies, and Liberty Reserve, it's the same bag of tricks that we've seen for years now. They've got the global financial teddy bear task force out there. They're shutting down Liberty Reserve, shutting down Bitcoin exchanges, instilling fear. They don't want you to have any control of your money. You poke the tiger, they get threatened, and it won't stop. What do we have to do to stop it?
Well, first, how do you stop it? That's a great question. First you have to start on the individual level. Noam Chomsky, I believe, talked about it, or someone. Not Noam Chomsky, someone before him, that it all has to begin maybe it was him, on the grassroots level. And I'm a firm believer of that. So it begins with yourself. So let's just talk about enough of selves. Let's suppose enough of self stop buying everything corporate that we didn't have to buy anymore. So when you go shopping, you don't buy corporate food. When you go out to eat, you don't eat or drink corporate beverages or food. So rather than going to a Dunkin' Donuts, you go to your local coffee place. You do everything you can locally. Now, I say that, and it has a huge effect, because the margins on these mega multinationals are so thin that once they start losing business, they go into a steep free fall. And if enough people boycotted the chains and started buying and building local, the whole game changes. And what do? You start standing up and speaking out. Like, for example, no more to war. We're on the path now to a new war with Syria. They're setting us up for it. France came out. They're using those chemical weapons over there. We did some laboratory tests. Oh, yeah, we'll trust the French. Aren't you the cats that just invaded Mali? You can't get over your French Sudan trip. You were there since 1896 to 1960, and you want it back because of the gold of 50 tons that they pulled out of the earth and the cheap uranium from Niger next door to fuel your 75% of your electricity and power comes from nuclear power plants, and you're giving us this BS line. So people have to start speaking out, and they have to begin it with the local level, as I said, on every level, but first on the personal level. Are you in shape physically, spiritually, and emotionally? How do you dress? How do you present yourself? What do you eat each day? Are you in the best shape you could be, and are you doing in life what you could do best? So when that starts to change, Andrew, then everything changes. There's no magic answer. The answer is an individual answer as I see it. And then everything changes. And then we start demanding new systems. I'm all in favor of direct democracy. It works over in Switzerland, highest standard of living in the world. Food's real good. Nice place to go to. Everybody has guns and they're not blowing each other's brains out. Haven't been in a war since what? About 1857.
Don't you dare think that any other country could do it better than the land of the free. Gerald Celente is my guest, TrendsResearch.com. They just might call him a traitor for saying that. We're talking about traitors with Edward Snowden today. If you don't buy the government's line, you probably are one. We'll come back on the Nomad Capitalist Report. I'm Andrew Henderson. We're back on the Nomad Capitalist Report, live on air and at nomadcapitalist.com. Gerald Celente is our guest. Mr. Celente, thank you for being with us. We were talking before the break about Switzerland. Somehow their government a little bit less intrusive, and they haven't fallen off the cliff into the sea yet. Here's one thing that's interesting, though, by the way, about Switzerland, because I spend so little time now in the United States. There's certain benefits to the United States. You get 29-cent drinks at the gas station all summer long. But you go to other countries, they don't have the cheese product that the United States has. Cheese product. It's not real cheese. They wouldn't tolerate this ass anywhere in Switzerland or France or anywhere else in the world. And to your point, when I'm in Vietnam and places like that, I'm seeing new McDonald's. I think McDonald's is now finally getting to Vietnam. They will stop at nothing. They're going to turn the world into their slave.
Exactly. And that's why I call what's going on Slavelandia. And that's what we've all become. We become slaves to the corporations. So again, if you had 15 or 20% of the people starting to boycott these places and then start speaking out against them, and start making fun of people that support them, in the sense of not making fun of them, pointing fun, but look what you're doing to yourself. Yeah, I mean, I can't believe what this country in the United States looks like anymore. My God, how fat, obese the people have gotten. I mean, it's like every day there's, I look out, I can't believe it. And you didn't get like this because of, just by eating poorly. It's by what you're eating. And the low nutritional value, the high corn syrup content of everything, the GMO foods. So again, it starts at the local level. And I really believe that there can be a renaissance. But again, it has to begin with the people. And again, with the entertainment business as well. And what they call entertainment, what they call music. I mean, you like it, fine, but don't call it music. It's, it's techno stuff, and it's not playing an instrument. So call it what you want, but that's not what it is. And by the way, Verdi, in creating his operas, he did it for the passion of one reason and one reason only. And that was for the Italians, for the music to inspire them so much that they would drive out the invaders. And it did. And, when he died, it's reported that more people went to his funeral than anyone else in recorded history. He inspired the people through music. It's a fact. It's a model exists. I'm not making it up. And, in the 1800s, Italy was controlled. Germany had a piece. Austria had a piece. Hungary had a piece. Spain, France. The Neapolitans spoke virtually a different language than the Calabrians. So he united the country with music. And to me, art is the way of finding the true meaning of the human spirit. And the art begins with the individual.
Here's why, I love what you're talking about. Gerald Celente, TrendsJournal, Trends Research. Here is my concern. I look at all the things that are going on. People, and like I mentioned earlier, the latest thing that they're now cracking down and spewing their propaganda machine onto is the whole Bitcoin cryptocurrency thing, where if you do that, you're a totally awkward person and you're a rebel and you should be silenced and you should be castrated. And look at what happens. They do this every time. They go out and they say, listen, we're going to come up with some fakakta law. You can't play poker online. You can't gamble online. You can't do this. You can't do that. You're in the land of the free. And then what they do is, rather than have their law enforcement thugs get off their lazy ass and go out and bust some perps and do their effing job and actually crack down on some people, what they do is they say, all right, we've done nothing. We've solved no crimes. And now we have people gambling with Bitcoin or selling drugs with Bitcoin. So now we're going to go after that and shut down those things and take away more of people's freedoms because nobody cares, because we've marginalized those things. And you know what? We won't do our job. We won't do anything, but we're just going to keep persecuting you because we just want to sit around and take away your freedoms.
And that's called fascism. And it's the merger of state and corporate powers. And if there's anybody that denies that, I can back it up and prove it with 4 simple words. Too big to fail. We had to bail out the banks. And not only the United States, around, look at Europe. Look at other places. I mean, the banks made bad bets and we had to cover the bad bets. So it's the banks that are running the show. And so there's nothing really new about it. It's been going on forever. So the examples are there, and you can see, of course, you're talking about Bitcoin or anything else. They're not going to allow any competition. That's all this is about. And it's not only in the competition of Bitcoin or other kind of currencies. Look what's going on with NATO and the United States destroying the Iranian rial. They're prohibiting, countries and companies around the world from dealing with them in their currency. So, anybody that they don't like, they take down. And by the way, it's war. It's a form of war.
There's only one reason the Iranian currency is in the toilet, and that you can go and get a 20% interest rates because one government has decided, in their unilateral opinion, that government must be stopped at all costs.
Exactly. And so where does it go back to? Again, this isn't a very complicated scenario. We have basically 2 groups that are running the show. One is the military-industrial complex. Am I saying that? No. I'm repeating what the 5-star general, the supreme commander of the Allied forces during World War II, and 2-term Republican president said, Dwight D. Eisenhower, warning us that the military-industrial complex is taking over the nation, robbing us of the genius of the scientists, sweat of the laborers, and future of the children. And look where all our technology goes to. Bill, how about a drone? You got one flying over you right now? Could you imagine we could have an alternative energy 20, 30 years ago? But the money's not being put there. Number 2 are the money changers. And nothing has changed. It goes back to Jesus Christ driving him out of the temple, over 2,000 years ago, where James Madison observing, quote, history records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance. Can anybody say Federal Reserve?
Gerald Celente is with us. They keep you down, though. And here's one thing that I do find fascinating in such a negative way is that look at what now the TSA is going to do. They're going to say, all right, you won. We lied through our teeth to you about some of these machines that can see your genitals, and we can stare in the back room, and we can get our jollies. We said that they were perfect for you for so long. All right, fine, we'll back off on that. And they want to be lauded. We take away your freedoms, we take away everything, and then we'll give you an inch back. And you should applaud us for doing that, if you can even believe that we're doing what we say we're going to do.
Well, again, it's a mafia. If people call them Republicans, Democrats, Socialists, whatever the hell you call them, it's a mafia. It's a political mafia, and it's a takeover, is what I'm saying. Again, look what happened with the Boston incident on Patriots Day of all days, right? I mean, the founding fathers would be turning in their grave. They closed down 100 square miles of Boston to get a 19-year-old kid. And then they lied about all the incidents that happened. And I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. It's a fact. They lied. The kid and his brother didn't rob the 7-Eleven. They told us he did. It was a lie. They weren't armed with all these rifles and bombs and other weapons. They found him with a 9mm gun. They lied. They said there was a shootout at the end with the kid lying in the boat. There was no shootout. The kid didn't have a gun. They shot him out. Remember that shot through the throat? Yeah, it looks like a suicide attempt. Oh, yeah, everybody shoots themselves in the throat for a suicide attempt. So what I'm saying is, it's at every level. Why would anybody believe one thing that they say? Read my lips, no new taxes. I didn't have sex with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. I smoked, but I didn't inhale. Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda.
There is this idea, and you wrote something I want to ask you about in the spring Trends Journal, TrendsResearch.com, where you wrote the obituary for democracy. So many people in the land of the free think that they're still talking about the concept of getting a better government. And you go back and you look at all the governments and you look at all these guys who have lied to you, as you're saying. But people say, oh, well, the Constitution protects us. Go to Brunei and look at their Constitution. The Sultan just changes it with a stroke of a pen. Go to any of these countries with a Constitution where it can be wiped out, and it can be wiped out in this country, too. That's why you're saying that the death of democracy. Am I right?
It's been taken over by the money changers in the military-industrial complex. What we said in The Death of Democracy, we quoted, and again, this is global. It's not only the United States. We quoted the New York Times. The headline read, Eurozone crisis has increased IMF's power. And it goes on to say how Christine Lagarde, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, has so much power. And they say that the IMF has more say over crisis management than many Eurozone members. Wow. Hey, how about that? And Miss Lagarde has become a quasi-head of state. Hey, wonderful. The IMF has become a quasi-head of state. And Miss Lagarde helps impose order on quarreling national leaders. Woo!
And right. And so when the EU comes together and says, hey, how can we fix the problem in Cyprus to bail out our own ass? Oh, we'll just take everyone's money. And then the groups like the IMF come in and say, right, of course, that's great. And they act as if they're oblivious that anyone would ever disagree with them.
And again, you mentioned Cyprus. You could do the same thing in Ireland. You could do the same thing in Spain, in Italy,
in Canada,
in Greece, in Portugal, and in the United States. So every time a bank goes bad, the people bail it out. And again, this is not a democracy. Look, the United States has 536 congressmen and senators in total, somewhere around there.
535, yeah, right.
535. So here you have this small gang telling 315 million people what to do, and then with the big lie that they're a representative form of government. You think they're representative?
What's worse, they're telling everyone else what to do. They want to tell everyone else in every other country what they have to do. They're going to tell every foreign financial institution they have to be the tattletale for the IRS. They're going to tell other countries that they're going to be invaded by the U.S. They're going to tell 7 billion people what to do if they have their way.
Exactly.
We've talked about this, too. When I was born, when you were born, when everyone listening pretty much was born, for the most part, the U.S. was number one in that list of places to be born. Now it's 16 or 17. You've talked about this in your Trends Journal. What do you see happening in the next 5 or 10, 20 years?
If we throw up our hands and keep letting our leaders lead us, then we can see where it's going. I'd like to see a revolution, a peaceful revolution, one of the mind, the spirit, a moral revolution, intellectual revolution. I don't want any violence, and nothing happens with that's going to win. But we can't have violence in trying to change the direction the nation and the world is going in. We can do it if we, the people, are heard, and our voice is, and they really become public servants.
One of these days, I'm going to convince you to join me in Singapore or somewhere and become a nomad. Until then, hey, Gerald Celente, Trends Journal, TrendsResearch.com. Check it out. He's been on top of all these things for 25 years, predicting all the trends. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, thank you for having me, Andrew.
Now, if you want to take advantage of the freedoms that Gerald Celente is talking about and that we talk about, you need to get our free white paper that discusses 7 steps to economic freedom on a global scale. So what are the ways to protect your money? What are the ways to get citizenship insurance for when the government goes completely mad? What are the ways to protect yourself? We lay out 7 steps to do that. Go to nomadcapitalist.com and you can get that free white paper for our listeners. nomadcapitalist.com. We'll continue. I'm Andrew Henderson. This is the Nomad Capitalist Report.